Good afternoon and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns short news here on YouTube and DLive. My name is Tom Luongo. It is Sunday, May 5th. Happy Cinco de Mayo to everybody. 2019. Today we want to talk about Brexit and European elections and corruption at the top of the British government and a variety of other things as well. I think we have to begin to get a handle on what's really beginning to coalesce around all of these different issues. So let's start with the standard boilerplate stuff. You can follow me over at tomluongo.me, where I write regularly, as well as have my work scraped over to Zero Hedge and Strategic Culture and a variety of other places around the internet. You can also support me over at Patreon /GoldGoatsandGuns, and you can follow me on Twitter whenever the hell I decide to tweet, which isn't very often because Twitter is a cesspit of that's completely uninteresting at TFL1728, but it is a good way to get a hold of me if you have something that you think I should be well aware of. All right. Let's get started. So, the latest thing here that's really impressive is to see the latest polls coming out about Brexit. Aside from the wipeout of the major parties in local council elections in Britain over the weekend, Farage and the Brexit Party in the latest polling have topped 30%. They've opened up now a clear lead over Labour by 9 points. So now we can't even talk about, well, they're kind of neck and neck, or were they in the margin of error, yada, yada, yada. No, 30%. And Labour's only polling at 1%. The Tories are polling at 13%. They lost nearly 500 councillor seats over the weekend. And it's amazing how quickly this has shifted, but I'm not at all surprised, right? That things are happening the way they are. I said this morning to my subscribers over on Patreon, I said, things are happening in a way that I had hoped, but not really expected. You know, if you really think about it, what's the thing you hope for in this situation? 1,330 council. Actually, I saw a number this morning that was much smaller than that, but whatever. Even so, even better. It's 1,300 council seats. What's important to understand here is that that things are happening at a rate that you can only wish for, right? That it's the kind of thing that you only think you see in movies. Like, you know, all of a sudden everybody rises up and, you know, and oversees the sanctioning of a new government or a new society forming, a la the end of, say, V for Vendetta. So the situation with Brexit is really fascinating. See how quickly the British electorate is coalescing around this as the prime issue, because this is really about sovereignty, and it's about understanding that the people want control over their government back. And I spent a lot of time this morning watching some stuff recommended to me by various listeners and various followers, trying to get a handle on this whole sacking of Gavin Williamson, the defense minister, and what that means relative to how the British government is structured and whatnot. And the main takeaway that I've taken from this and I've gotten from this is that the Brits have the same kind of permanent bureaucracy problem that we have here in the United States. And Theresa May has done nothing but strengthen that permanent democracy by merging multiple offices under the auspices of one Mark Sedwill, and who's one of the most vindictive men on the planet. So, and I don't know what okay, by the way, I'm still trying to figure out what Cyrus Rubrum is actually talking about, because I've been quite clear on everything, and actually everything has been happening exactly the way I've been expecting to play out now for weeks on end. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. So, if you want to sit here and call me a flip-flopper, you can go fuck yourself. because I haven't flip-flopped at all. I've been right about everything. So we'll go on. So just to remind everybody, oh, by the way, if you're going to lie about me, that's one thing. But if you're going to lie, do it well. Don't fuck around. Okay. So while we're here, while looking at this, yeah, but British polls. While looking at this, we have Farage and the Brexit Party now at 30%, which is an unbelievable number. And it's bearing out exactly what I expected. Uh-oh, I just hit the swear jar. So I got an ice cream from Standard Dev over on DLive. It's an incredible result, and it'll probably rise from here. We saw a number of people spoiling their ballots. We saw an incredibly low turnout. It's an amazing shift, and it only shows that Farage was absolutely right. I watched Farage's radio show on YouTube day in and day out for the last month that it was around, until he announced that he was standing as an MEP in the European parliamentary elections, at which point his radio show was cut off. And every day he kept reiterating the same thing, that the pulse of the British people is that they want Brexit, they don't want what UKIP is selling, and they want control over their government again. And so we now they are having to stand up and realize how hard it is to actually get the entrenched people out of these offices. And the only way to do that is to get rid of both parties standing at the both parties who stand at the top of the political spectrum, and that Brexit is the issue that can galvanize everybody across the political spectrum. And so what Farage is doing is he's saying, look, there's a very simple order of operations here, and this is something I wish American politicians over here would do, which is that we have to clean up the corruption first. We have to get control of our government first. Then we can start arguing about where we should put all the money. But let's start by saying we're going in the wrong direction completely, and that both parties do not serve our interests. It's why we voted for Donald Trump in 2016. It's why the Brits voted for Brexit 6 months before that, 5 months before that, and it's why they're now moving in droves to vote for Farage for the first European parliamentary elections, and then you can expect that to happen in any general election that comes up. And the Tories are all going crazy. The election results over the weekend were terrible for them. So, no, I never loved Gavin Williamson. What the fuck are you talking about, guys? I never once said one good word about Gavin Williamson. Not once. I hope you're not. Seriously, I don't understand what you're talking about. Gavin Williamson is a joke as a defense minister. He's been nothing but the most ridiculous cartoon of a Russophobic for the entirety of his time as defense minister. It's ridiculous. Whatever. So what's happening now, and what you can see happening, is there's going to be a fundamental shift in British politics going forward, and the real fight is going to be over ousting the entrenched power structures of the civil servants. It's exactly the same fight that Trump is fighting here in the United States, and losing, by the way. You know, I can sit here and say that Trump wants to fight this, wants to win this fight, but he hasn't won a battle yet. Well, he's won one battle. And it's a battle that he unfortunately invited on himself, which is the Mueller investigation. So when you look at what's happening and you go inside the polling numbers, remember what's really important. The Tories are now polling below 16% for the European parliamentary elections. I've said this all the time. I keep coming back to this point over and over and over again. The 16% chasm is real. It exists in cell phones. It exists in VCRs. It exists in politics. And I think it exists more in politics than it exists anywhere else, which is that once you hit that 16% level, either going above it or coming or crashing down through it, it will change everything about your political future. It is the breaking point. It is the break point between continued success or continued failure. So, watching the Tories poll below 13% gives me hope now that this will translate into the general election. I was never really convinced of that. Always convinced that at a certain level, people vote in the European parliamentary elections for minor parties simply because they think it's a good protest vote. It's a low cost, right? It's the European elections. It doesn't really matter. It's not a real election. It's not a real government. It's just the European government. That's kind of like fake government. Until they realize now, and they're beginning to realize that the European Union isn't fake government. It absolutely is the more important of their governments. And I think that's the dawning realization that everybody's beginning to have across Europe, that it doesn't matter what they do in their local elections. The EU is taking over and dictating to their local governments, and their local governments are powerless to stop any of it. And so, but I was not convinced before we started to see this campaign for the European parliamentary elections that this would actually take place. It's one thing to see people starting to get angry. It's one thing to see, AFD come out and get 15, 16%. It's another thing to see Vox come out and get, 12, 13% in Spain. Those numbers are not interesting to me. Okay? It's not interesting to me to see Geert Wilders get 16% or whomever. It's interesting to me to see them get 35%, to become a dominant party and to destroy one of the two major parties, because they don't care. Because look, if I understand this stuff, I got news for you. Angela Merkel understands it. Theresa May understands it, right? Soros understands it. Brock, all of these people, they all understand the concept of the 16% chasm. They understand it. It's why the attacks on dissident or alternative candidates and parties gets really ugly the minute they start creeping above 10%. Because they understand that between 10 and 15% is not hard, but once they get above 16%, they go from 16 to 40% really freaking fast. And they have to do massive damage control to try and keep the vote totals under 25 or under 28%, or under 30%. Because that can change all of the election calculus completely, especially in a first past the post system. So it's fascinating to see how quickly this is changing. I saw over the weekend that, or during the last week, for example, that this is all getting very organized all the way across Europe, right? We have Matteo Salvini and Viktor Orban did a press conference earlier in the week about how strongly they support each other's immigration policy. And look, the optics should be clear to everybody. If Salvini and Orban are taking meetings together, public meetings together, they're absolutely in alignment as to what they're going to do once the European parliamentary elections have been dealt with, right? Once the results are in, because it's very possible for Orban's Fidesz party to leave the European People's Party and join Salvini's alliance, right? We're going to see how many people Farage can put into the European Parliament as well in 3 weeks. Now, between now and then, Theresa May is doing everything imaginable to try and get Jeremy Corbyn to come together so that they can put a new deal on the table that they can vote on and try and stop all this, because the last thing at this point she wants is another election, which shows just how fundamentally unpopular she is, while she stands there like Baghdad Bob, for Christ's sake, and goes, "I'm trying to get you Brexit." And no one believes a fucking word that comes out of this woman's mouth anymore, but I'm still trying to get you Brexit. No, really. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? I mean, but that's what she has to do. And it's like, and it's so sad to watch this happen. These people are so old and so inflexible and so desperate and so useless, but unfortunately still having control of the power base, that we have to go through and watch the sad and pathetic spectacle play itself out. And in the process, watch that play itself out, destroy the lives of millions of people around the world. Let's not forget that. This is the part that absolutely everybody here should be outraged about. This is what the British people are feeling at the gut of their, at the core of their beings. What American conservatives are so angry about over how badly Donald Trump has been treated by the Democrats and Mueller and all the rest of them, and that Trump had to engage in, practically engage in the worst kind of legal subterfuge to get Bill Barr in charge installed as Attorney General to stop what is effectively a coup. It's unfrickin' real. So. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable how these things have played themselves out. The other thing to remind everybody, and this is the fun part, I've noticed also, FYI, that I was right about this as well. I said that the minute Farage organizes the Brexit Party and puts it together, that he would steal support from UKIP. He was right about that. If he didn't think that was the case, he would have gone back to UKIP and used their 10% support, or 6 or 7 or 8% support, as a springboard to the next 15 or 8 or 25 or 30%. But he knew that wasn't the case. And I challenged and told every UKIP supporter that came into this channel that tried to call Farage a stalking horse for the establishment to split the real Leave vote. Bullshit. He's uniting the real Leave vote, which cuts across all party lines. And the fact that most UKIPers at this point still think that they're the gatekeepers of the real Brexit is laughable in the extreme. In that same poll where Farage is polling at 30%, UKIP's back to 4%. Not 2 months ago or 6 weeks ago when we were approaching the original Brexit deadline, they were polling as high as 11%. And that was a protest vote. If people were really interested in seeing UKIP take any kind of control whatsoever, they wouldn't have lost councillor seats this week. So it's absolutely clear what has to what's happening here. The biggest, and this is the part that and I'm gonna respond to something somebody said, which is that while Farage may have incredible energy, he's unlikely to field enough candidates, let alone win it. He has the candidates, I think, for the European elections. Now, in the general election, that may be true, but which I think you're discounting is the idea that once we get to a general election and the Tories are on a path to extinction, you're going to see a lot of Tory Leave MPs switch parties for that general election. Farage is going to get 60 or 70 or 80 seats as the Tories implode. Guys like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Owen Patterson and the rest of them are going to have a real look in the mirror moment, a real, check your cojones at the door moment. What do you really stand for moment when the general election comes? And I think we're going to see mass defections from the Tories to Farage from the Leave portion of the Tories, who are, by the way, not welcome within their own party anymore. So what's the point of even staying? Farage is now going to give you the infrastructure and the support base to go and do what you actually want to do, or do you not want to do it? So, now I know that UKIP is nothing. I mean, Hayakaden, I understand that that UKIP gets a bad rap. Don't get me wrong. It's the same thing with AFD. It's the same thing with the libertarians here in the United States. It's the same thing. If we were ever a viable political force, they would smear us with the same, Nazi stuff. Libertarians being Nazis. It's really kind of funny. I understand that. But that doesn't matter. Okay? What matters is what public sentiment you can move. You got to remember that Nigel Farage is an old commodities trader. He understands two things. He understands that markets don't move on fundamental. They understands like a couple of very important points. He understands that markets don't move on fundamentals. They move on sentiment, and they move on momentum. And sentiment drives momentum, and eventually will reflect fundamentals. But they do not. It is not a one-to-one correlation. Anybody who trades based on fundamentals will lose money, especially in today's freaking rigged, goosed, and fake fucking markets. And it's the same thing in public sentiment when it comes to political things, political issues. You have to understand that people don't make their decisions politically based on fundamentals for all intents and purposes. They make them based on perception. They make them based on the value of their vote for a particular party. Majoritarian or first past the post, winner take all voting systems imply this kind of strategic thought, strategic and tactical voting. It's what they do. It's what people do. And they make these decisions and they weigh them not based on any kind of rational, principled stance. How many people voted for the Liberal Democrats this past week simply to give two fingers up to the Tories and Labour? So, when you watch this play out, Farage understands what's going to win him an election and what's going to make the kind of change that's necessary based on the people that he's trying to persuade at this moment in time. Momentum and sentiment, not fundamentals. This is a lesson for all things, not just for financial markets, but for how you deal with political perceptions. Okay, it's very important. And that's why UKIP is not going to get any traction. Something else I want to put in your bonnet before I leave. We're at 23 minutes. A couple other points I want to make. So here's the big one. With the Russiagate investigation over, with the Mueller investigation having to be shut down because Bill Barr and Trump's legal team beat Robert Mueller to death legally by taking away his the legal justification for his Mueller's obstruction of justice investigation, right? Because he couldn't prove collusion, so now the only thing Mueller had was to go after Trump on obstruction of justice, and the way they were doing it was to interpret statutes that would only could have only been written in Philip K. Dick's World Minority Report, which is basically pre-crime, saying, well, if Trump takes any action that we construe as impeding or affecting a future investigation procedure, well, that can be considered obstruction. Well, that's just fucking pre-crime. And that's why it failed. And that's why Trump is no longer, that's why Mueller is no longer running a special prosecutor's office. That's why this is all happening today. I kind of covered this the other day. So I covered it on my Friday night stream and the article by Will Chamberlain over Human Events, which you can go look up. The article is called Checkmate. Should do it. But there's some blowback that's going to come from this. Now, I'm not been happy with Donald Trump at all, and I don't have high hopes for a lot of this. But I do believe that he's both vain and vindictive because he's ultimately a narcissist. And because he's vain and vindictive, I fully expect there to be some comeuppance. We can already see that with what's happening coming out of Barr's office, issuing investigations into Nellie Orr and others. It's already starting. He's going to start the process of rolling up a lot of the conspirators within the Russiagate conspiracy to get his revenge. And he's going to be allowed to get some scalps. But the bigger issue here is that it's going to blow back onto the Brits, because they're intimately at every level as MI6 and involved in this, and effectively the British civil service. Okay, there's a lot going on here. It's all interconnected in a certain level, and anything that Trump decides to try and prosecute through the AG's office could have serious implications on the British political system as well going forward. If any of this stuff were to start coming out during the general election and whatnot, it could have massive blowback. All right. So you have to think that through when you can connect the dots from the fact that MI6 helped Steele put the dossier together and helped John McCain put it in John McCain's hands, and and then and there's all of this Russiagate stuff. There's all of this ridiculous Russophobia, the stuff created by Gavin Williamson and the rest of them, whether he was involved or not. But they certainly went along with it, putting sanctions on Russia, saying horrible things about Russia should just go away, and all this crap. This is all scripted crap. This is all scripted stuff that came from the civil service, came from the intelligence community, given to them. And Theresa May was absolutely up to her eyeballs in all of this stuff in order to get rid of Trump. The fake opposition to him going to have a state visit over in the UK, which is just ridiculous, over the top virtue signaling. It's unbelievable that the president of the United States would not be able to go on a state visit to the United Kingdom of all freaking places. It's unbelievable that this kind of ridiculous virtue signal is coming from the mainstream, coming from the British media over there and from the political left. Just otherworldly. All of these people are on their last legs politically. Every one of them. And it all comes down to, if you look at it, it comes down to what's coming down the pike in the next general election for the Brits and the European parliamentary elections in 3 weeks, which could easily have greater impact down the road on any future elections across the European Union. Look, the Eurosceptics could easily wind up having the largest bloc within the EU Parliament. I don't know that it'll get them the EU Commission presidency, but it'll certainly put them in a position where it will be just not a good time for the globalists. They will have to work that much harder. And I'm telling you, the people who you're talking about here that are running this show are not the world's swiftest freaking people. You got to understand that Donald Tusk is not fucking competent. Neither is Guy Verhofstadt. Neither is Jean-Claude Juncker. The only one competent at running the world, at running an evil empire, is Angela Merkel. The rest of them are all schmucks. The rest of them are all bureaucrats. They're all drunkards and bureaucrats, and they failed at every other level. And if it wasn't for the fact that they have billions, they have billions of dollars behind them, and very powerful, competent people pulling strings behind them and setting things in motion, there's no freaking way these people would survive any kind of direct challenge. So it's that's where we are at this point, and that's what I find really fascinating. And we have to keep in mind what comes next, because if Trump goes after effectively the civil service here in the United States, if he goes after the DOJ and the Department of State, because look at everything that happened this week, massive blowback in British elections, right? An absolutely Bay of Fat Pigs level idiocy, thumping of U.S. foreign policy wonks and intelligence services in Venezuela. Trump then calls Putin up on Friday afternoon, publicizes the whole freaking thing. By the way, he doesn't call Putin, because he talks to Putin privately all the time. Okay, but made a point of telling everybody they had a multi-hour conversation with Vladimir Putin 3 days after we attempt to install our dude, or some random guy, as president of Venezuela to do our bidding. Meanwhile, his national security staff and his State Department, and everybody else are doing everything they can to try and push him publicly towards continuing this operation. And he's like, no. When I'm hearing multiple reports behind the scenes, like Trump and Southcom are going, we're not going to invade Venezuela. And then Trump gets on the phone with Putin and starts talking about everything? Are you nuts? So, you know, there comes a point where Trump is in the clear politically now to start pushing back. We'll see how big his balls really are. I don't think they're very big. But we could see some very, very interesting things happening. All right? Coming forward. All right. So if it starts here in the United States and Trump figures out a way to go after his civil service here in the United States, Trump and Farage talk all the time. If Farage becomes prime minister in the next 2 years, guess what? Mark Sedwill will be in jail. Okay? For treason. All right? This is what's coming. All right. Let's see. There you go. I think that's good enough. Yeah, I think that's good enough. So, enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon. Let's see. Couple of housekeeping tips before we leave. I'm hearing from Bruce Alexi that he likes Brave. If you guys have not signed up for the Brave browser in order to be able to tip your favorite verified content publishers, you really should. It's a perfectly functional and serviceable browser. I don't know about you, but I use at least 2 or 3 in order to get everything done that I want to get done in my life. But Brave works really well. Yeah, Sedwill. Mark Sedwill is the issue for is effectively now king of Britain because of the way Theresa May has given him unbelievable amounts of power. But let's get back with the outro. So, and I'm going to delve more into this over time. Okay, so. But if you haven't installed Brave browser, you should do so. There's a link down below. I'll get a kickback, which would be kind of nice. But this is a way you can donate to your favorite content publishers, either here on YouTube or on their websites directly, in order to support their work without having to go through the ridiculous Google Sphere or Apple Sphere or any of that other stuff and all of that. So I think Brave is really cool. So how do you earn coins with the Brave browser? You turn on Brave Rewards and you opt in for having it serve you an ad or 2 every hour. You click on the ad, you watch the ad, you look at the ad. But otherwise, you're not going to see any ads. You're not going to see any trackers or anything else. Brave cuts all that stuff out, takes all that bandwidth, and bins all that bandwidth, as the Brits would say, and gets you some of your time back. So every once in a while, click on an ad. Some of them are actually not bad. And you can earn them that way. You can also, of course, fund your account however you want. You can fund it with crypto. You can fund it with dollars. You can do it however you want. So note also that after I get done here, I've got a video to edit down and publish of a talk I did with Crypto Rich on Friday. I'm going to try and get that done this afternoon and get it out tomorrow morning. All right. So you guys take care. You have a great afternoon. And we'll talk soon. I ain't got nothing else to say. Keep your stick on the ice.